Activated. Okay. 1, 2,
3, 4.
All right.
Hello and welcome to the Life in the Kraken podcast Fillory edition, your dose of the magicians, lost within the flying forest. I'm your host, David Robertson, editor-in-chief of We've Always Lived in the Kraken blog. Alongside me, I have joining us from the Austin office, managing editor of the same blog, Josh Kayusewicz.
Sadly, our quest to figure out Elliot's sexuality takes another turn this episode. Someday we'll get the real answers.
We will definitely have to talk about that, as we will be discussing Season 2, Episode 4 of The Magicians, The Flying Forest. Let me do that again.
Okay.
Yes, and we will be talking about that as we discuss Season 2, Episode 4 of The Magicians, which is titled the aforementioned The Flying Forest. So I'm just going to go ahead and say that this may be, quite frankly, my favorite episode ever done in the show.
Well, hold on. Let's start with a recap, David.
Nope, I told you last week that was done.
Oh, come on. Okay, what? How about this? What if I promise to do the recap in haiku?
Which means it will be. You realize what that means, right?
What?
How short that means you're.
Yes, I have 4 haikus.
No, that's haikus, not in a haiku.
No, I didn't say in a haiku. I said in haiku, as in the medium of haiku.
You can do 2 of them.
No, it's a 4 haiku episode. Come on.
Fine.
Okay. Centaurs have horse dicks. Q is wounded wood and flesh. We're all beasts, questing. Alice gone for good. Fixing Penny's hands, a poor consolation prize. Fox can be banished. Dead Marina's real lesson. Do not go to hell. 2 kings made of clay. Interdimensional threesome has too many syllables.
But only one of them was made of clay.
Well, it's a metaphor. He's made of clay, and that he's indecisive.
That's not what that means.
Listen, don't critique my haikus. They're beautiful, beautiful poems.
And once again, you continue to prove why I don't want the recaps in the episode. So, another strike.
Next week, limericks.
Oh no. Anyhow, like I said, I'm just going to say, that I actually think I may have enjoyed this episode more than, if not more than the episode is just about more than, and actually I have complaints, but this is one of the few episodes that, even going with the fact that, unlike last week's episode, which was a really good episode, but suffered from a lot of the aforementioned issues we had with the previous episode of episode 2, this one didn't suffer as much from this. There are versions of this episode that could be better, sure, but this is a pretty damn good version of it, and did kind of exactly what we wanted it to do, and took a step back and acknowledged the season's going to kind of be about what happens next after these whole big bad monster things.
Yeah, I'll agree. I think that this is a really good episode, certainly compared to the rest of the show. I think it did a lot of what. Hang on, you're making weird noises. What's going on?
I'm not doing anything. Unless you're for some reason hearing the fan of my computer, which you've never heard before.
What am I hearing? Testing.
No.
Testing. The fuck is that? Jesus.
What is it? You have to describe the sound.
I'm hearing it's like rustling or something. It's like clothes rustling.
Not even moving. I don't know how it could be clothes rustling.
Yeah, I'm not moving either. But I'm only hearing it when I'm talking. Maybe it's like a cord issue? Sorry, hang on. Let me see if I can just fiddle with this and make it not do that shit, because I don't know what's happening.
And with that, everything was ruined.
Testing. Okay, that was it. Okay. So let me try that again. Yeah, I'll agree with that. I think that this was probably one of their best episodes that they've done. It was a really good episode, and it's gotten kind of the closest to getting to the heart of the stuff that the books have to say about what Quentin is going through at this point, and how he feels about magic and so on. So like I really enjoyed this episode.
Yeah, I mean, hold on a second. Flame was flying over anyhow, so I'll just let it.
That's fine.
Are you two planes? Oh, it's just circling. Okay, that's fine. Yeah, and this is like one of the few episodes that, just more importantly, I don't feel like just saying like it's good compared, like it is good compared to the rest of the show, but I think it's also just good. And like I feel like I don't need to qualify this one as much as I would certain other ones. And I mean, it's kind of like a reset in a lot of ways for the show, like a new working order. And part of that comes from, how they kind of reposition certain characters. Part of, as you see, I agree, it actually kind of hits the Quentin part really well. And they may now, they may actually be able to milk some of the Quentin as a normal Muggle type stuff more than even the books did. Not necessarily like the rest of the season, maybe like 2 episodes opposed to like 1.
It's gonna be 1.
Maybe. The only reason I don't know is I'm wondering if, because Julie is supposed to be a heavy part of bringing him back, so I just wonder if there'll be the space to do that. Hold on. I mean, it's probably 1, but I just wonder if there's, considering how important Julie is kind of to that in the books, I wonder if they may need a little bit more time to do space, and they use this to do that. And plus, by like putting Quentin in this one place, it can allow for some other more interesting integrations of characters a little bit. So, but you're probably right. It's probably 1, but at least that the fact that I could consider a version in which they do more is like an open, like it's like interesting version. And also the fact they put this is the one time I'll say that putting this in the middle of the season makes it where like it's not going to last, but if it's like your premiere, let's say that's the premiere of the season, then it's going to be over in this one. This version at least like it leaves it a little more open-ended, and I think that can help like make some of the stuff actually hit a little bit better than just the like, well, here's the premiere in which they're establishing this, and by the time the premiere is over, the show will be back to normal. So this is more like, well, the show doesn't necessarily have a normal anymore, so it's kind of resetting things, and like that's kind of exciting.
I don't know. I like those premieres. I think that they're happen often for a reason. But I should correct what we said earlier in a podcast, that like they didn't split this because they went from 13 episodes to 10, because they had 13 episodes last season, and I just forgot it because last season flew out of my memory for my own sake. But I still think that like this is a weird structure that I'll probably complain about at the end of the season. But I think the second half of the season should hopefully be better in that sense.
Oh.
Actually, hold on one second.
It's fine. We're getting the exceptionally loud planes, so I don't really want to.
Yeah, I can hear them.
That's why I'm stopping, as opposed to last couple times I've been like, there's like the soft plane. These are like these planes are like flying barely above my house. Are you good?
I'm gonna order some pizza. The hell?
We are kind of on a clock, so you know.
I know. It's all set up. I just have to click it to make sure that it's clicked. Come on.
Yep, sounds like you just have to click.
Sorry, there's more than one click. It like deleted some of my stuff, so.
It's kind of funny.
What?
Someone was posting an article about how another neo-Nazi got punched in the face, and someone goes, "The black person was doing it. No one would punch them in the face. Well, except for the aforementioned neo-Nazi, but he doesn't count." I'm like, well, he doesn't count when he gets punched in the face. That's all I'm gonna say.
All right, and I'm back.
Yeah, I mean, the structure of the season is still gonna be weird, but I think they figured a way where I think this could actually work somewhat to their advantage. And like you said, it does set up the rest of the season to work really well. And they have a shorter episode order this time, presumably because this is a more expensive season since they're doing so much in Fillory. Because, you know, I mean, they haven't done tons, but they've done more than you would expect. A lot of times shows like this would just like figure out way more reasons for why they all will be back at Breaks Bills, like every one of them. And they're like, aren't you guys really a kingdom? And it's like, yeah, we'll get back to that.
Man, they go back to break bills so often. Like, I expect the dean to just be like, you know, we can't miss you if you never stay away.
Well, I mean, we'll get more into this when we discuss. Can you hear that one?
Yeah. Okay.
Well, we'll get more into this when we discuss. You don't need to tell me when I can start talking. I'm I'm behind the plane. It's literally flying over me.
Okay.
We'll get into this a little more when we talk about Elliot, because that kind of his story kind of applies both towards our discussion of his still undetermined sexuality and towards this discussion of them going back and forth to break bills. But I think we probably do need to kind of delve into just the Quentin part of the story, and by extension, Penny, since he walked along. So I will say they did a good job when we kind of talked about how we weren't like his shoulder wound didn't appear that serious last week. They did a pretty good job of when they re-showed like the previous Leons. You see how deep the gash actually is. It just doesn't look that deep.
Mm.
And it kind of establishes more that like the reason Quentin couldn't walk is because his arm was like he had this gash in his arm, which made like one of his arms not work functionally.
Yeah.
I still think they probably angled it. It was still shot a little weird because the angle wasn't great. You really don't see how bad it is till like he's on the ground and you see how they do like a bunch of close-ups that seem to actually not be in the last episode.
Well, part of it is also just that like in there are plenty of other movies and TV shows where that wound would not prevent like a determined hero from standing up and continuing to fight, and so the fact that he was like, I'm a real person and this hurts like a bitch and I'm going to be lying down now, was like, you know, not necessarily like, they didn't really make a point of it, and so it came off a little strange.
Yeah, even though like that's the kind of wound that the people who could survive that are like trained fighters who,
yeah,
like, or like, you know, you can make an argument, I guess, about like a person in peril, like a, you know, a parent trying to pick a loved one type one in peril. But the problem with that was that like Q really didn't have a reason to do it to really move until he was like trying to get to Alice and like stop her. Because before that point, effectively part of it also was Q's like, well, I'm hurt. Alice is better than me anyhow, so she's got this. And then, I think that plays a big part of it. But it did lead to we were wondering if he'd get the wood in the.
Yeah, I was pleased. That was a very cool thing. I liked the scene of them like sewing the wood together to him. It was very gory and interesting.
Yeah, they did have to also show like they did have to also when they first did it. I thought actually he had lost more of his arm because of how they showed the sewing, and then later you see it's just like a big chunk.
Yeah,
which made more sense because at first I was like, wait, did he like lose an entire arm? Because it looks like they're just replacing his entire arm with wood.
Yeah, I had the same thought, but yeah.
I'm trying to remember. He had more than just his arm replaced or like more than just a chunk of his arm replaced in the books, right?
Yeah, he had a couple of injuries that all became wood.
Like,
I think his I want to say like his knee became wood.
Yeah, it was enough injuries where it made sense that he was like unconscious for like a month.
Yeah.
As opposed to that's the only thing that hurt here is because it was a more serious injury than expected, but it wasn't serious enough to justify Quentin being unconscious for like a month.
I will say if I can get in my one you shouldn't have done it the way the books did it complaint, is that like the timeline is a little weird, just in terms of his isolation, in that like in the books like it makes a little more sense that he feels very cut off from all his friends. It doesn't have the same quite feel in the show because Penny is there with him, and because we see Margot and Elliot in a different plot line, so it doesn't quite feel like he's sort of alone in the world after losing Alice.
Doesn't
and
it
then,
last?
what?
Sorry, no, go ahead.
And then this ties into the at the end when his last wish of the questing beast is to go back to Earth, and it's like, well, but you could go back to Earth anytime. You don't need a wish to do that. So it just has a different feel to it.
Yeah, I mean, he's also I think he's with the centaurs longer in the books. I mean, they do a little bit of time, but like time because time functionally works differently. He's there longer. Also, since they're not actually kings and queens yet, in the book, he's just there.
Yeah, it's also I did think it was weird that like he's in the centaur place, but he spends most of his time interacting there with the non-centaur like nurse woman, which just seems like a kind of a. I mean, it seems like they were definitely really struggling to not pay for mountains of centaur CGI, but they needed to just like get over that.
Well, also the actor who played the centaur is a fairly famous character actor in sci-fi, so they may only add him for a couple scenes.
Yeah.
But
it was especially noticeable because I was like, oh, you're using this nurse so that you don't have to show the horse half, and then they shot her from the torso up the whole time, and I was like, guys, come on.
Except for a couple scenes, but those involved Penny and not Quentin, so that's fair. Or the part where she walked up, there's a little bit of her. But yeah, you're right that for the most part, she is shot in a way that could have just shot a centaur. Yeah. I mean, I will say, I do think this part, I will say this version of it's a little more interesting because in the book version, he doesn't have like one of the things that draws him back is the idea of being king and queen of becoming a king of Fillory. Like that's what draws him. One of the things that draws him back. There's also the joke of him not knowing what his focus is, and that draws him back as well. Like a throwaway line, but like that's part of like what draws him back in the books. So one thing that makes this effective is the idea that like he actually still has like a lot of stuff to offer. Like he can be in Fillory, he can be a king, he can do all the stuff.
He says in that monologue, he's like, I already have everything I want, which is slightly different from the book. Yeah.
Right. That's what I'm trying to say. It's like, I think that makes the moment actually work. It's a different one. That's why I think actually I found this one to work. You're like, he can go whenever he wants. Well, yeah, but I think it's actually interesting in this case that by him saying it is him being like, no, I'm giving up all of that. It's like him willfully. And in some ways, I think that actually works slightly better than it does in the book.
Well, I just mean that, like, if you were building this from scratch and like it's there's no need for him to make that dramatic pronouncement to the questing beast and have that be his wish, because he could just as easily like grab a button or turn to Penny and be like, take me to Earth or whatever. He doesn't really need her to do it for him.
Right. I mean, I assume for this to make sense, I understood why he needed the wish. I think in his mind he wanted to. I think it was a symbol. I mean, I think it was a symbolic gesture. He wanted to be like, look, I want to symbolically show how much I'm done with magic by using my magic to do whatever I want to effectively do something I could already do. That's how tired I am of magic.
Well, the other thing is that I think that's right. But the other thing is that just remembering, like, in the book, his friends leave him in Fillory, and he has no other way to get home. So it's not like, he could walk over to the castle and be a king with them and hang out. It's like they left him in another dimension, and he's like alone in this world and has that one exit point.
Right, which, I mean, that's another part what I'm saying is, like, in the book, the whole point of him using the questing beast is he has to find this. It's the only way he can get back home, because they're forced to, like, the letters, like, Elliot does leave a letter just like in here, but the letter's more like Elliot's like, we had to leave. I'm really sorry. Like, he's clearly...
Aren't they like, at that point, they're like, he's in a coma and they don't know if he's ever going to wake up?
Yes,
so like, we just have to go.
His injuries are much more severe.
Yeah.
And so, like, they don't know if he's going to wake up. Elliot's letter it's a similar thing of, like, just like the Elliot in this one is like, I don't want to leave you behind, but even more so, because in that one he's like, I really don't want to leave you behind, but I'm really sorry, Hugh, but like you may be dead and we have to go back. We can't just stay here.
Yeah, that one was like, you may be dead, and even if you're not, like, we may literally never see you again because there may be no way to come back.
Right, but
whereas nothing has been cut off at this point for them.
Right. And so I think, and I will agree, that's why, that half doesn't work as well, obviously, the Elliot leaving and stuff, because you lose the stuff here. But I do think the Q part of him leaving is actually it's just a different way of doing it. And I'm almost kind of interested in it because
it's a different statement. You're correct. You're correct in saying that.
And it does work in the book. It still works really well because, like, he does still try to get Alice back, for example. He does try to do this stuff. And then eventually he's just like, fuck it, just send me home. And then my assumption is they're going to try and play off that part of the wish is part of the wish is why he's like, giving up magic and doing this. Like, the wish helps do that, as opposed to, like, in the book, he goes back and then he goes to Fog and is just like, I'm fucking done with this. I want to do the same thing that, I don't remember her name, but the one character they have who does that basically does. And the whole point is supposed to be actually he works at her law firm, her hedge fund firm or whatever it is.
Yeah.
And then, they kind of have like a thing for a little bit.
Which like, I hope they do that stuff because I'm really interested to see that explored as the idea of, like, because one thing that the show has rarely touched on is like what it's like for adult magicians and the fact that there's like nothing for you to do. And so, like, I like that part in the book at the end of the first book where he goes to the hedge fund and they're like, what do you want to do all day? And he ends up just like playing solitaire and like earning a 6-figure salary because why not?
Yeah, and then he does like some stuff, but he's still not involved with magic. Yeah, he basically just goes and does it, but he doesn't use magic. So I'm hoping in this case, like, the wish itself is like, I'll use this as partially is that, like, I think part of the reason he wanted to do it was there's a scene, I think, and this is in the next but I think this is helpful, of like Elliot says, like, where the hell is Quentin?
Mm-hmm.
And I think part of the reason he made the wish also is because sure, he could have used the buttons, or sure, he could have, I think he also just wants a clean break from everybody.
Yeah.
Because like Penny doesn't even know he made the wish. Penny's unconscious on the ground. His hands are regrowing.
Penny's hands underwent a significant change in this episode. You don't say.
Well,
maybe this plot line will be over, or maybe next episode it'll be like, oh fuck, fine print. I said I wanted my hands back, but I didn't say I wanted them back uncursed. Oh no, my hands.
Hold on. I'm pretty sure they showed that his hands are still fucked up.
God.
I don't know if it's the same level, but I don't know if that entirely works. They better sell that well, though, because it kind of seems pointless to have done that and then have it literally be the same. So maybe it's just a slightly different version. who knows? I will say I also really enjoy what they did with the questing beast here. One, that I actually the makeup job of her is really good.
Yeah, that was really good.
Like she looks really like they do a really interesting version of it, especially because like the book definitely makes the beast more. Well, for one,
It's just an animal. The
it's
beast.
just an animal, right? That's what I'm saying. In the book, they make a big deal about how these are all the 7 animals, and they're all literally animals.
Although
And
I can't remember in the book, is she a different one from the one in the book? Like, does the book mention like the white lady as being a different one?
I don't remember that. I just because in the book it's like it's a deer.
Yeah, it's a stag. I think,
Stag.
right?
Yeah, it's like the questing stag, and he goes and finds it and shoots it, and then the stag gives the wishes. And
Which I
because
mean,
one of the wishes,
I'm still, you know, this was definitely better than the Amber Switch, but I'm still on record as saying that like big CGI animals who you know curse and talk to them is still would have been better than like these humanoid people.
Ember, I agree. I actually think this is better. I think the white lady works better because I think it helped express certain things. Because, like for example, they have like that sloth on the council.
Yes,
And it's cool.
That character won't be important later.
Yeah, and I like that, and it's cool. But I'm just pointing out that, like, you know, they do some of it. I actually think this one worked better. Ember, I agree, is weird, and probably would have worked better as an actual just stag, as like an actual like ram.
Yeah.
But I actually think the white lady here is a more interesting thing because it let some more emotions be shown, and I actually think this wishing worked better because with Penny being there, it helped too because in the wishes there, like one of the things he wishes for when he catches the stag in the book is he undoes the wood stuff.
Yeah, well, in this one they just paint over it, which I thought was a really interesting way to go.
Right, but I mean, I like the fact that it's going to be there. It's clearly going to stay there because one, they only get 2 wishes. He doesn't get a 3rd wish.
Right.
But I also just like her visible expressions are interesting because she basically knows. Like she's like, "What do you want, Quentin?" And Quentin's like, "I have everything. You're right." And she's like, "Exactly." And then basically, when he like makes the wish to leave, she kind of gives a look of like, "That is the correct answer." I thought was interesting.
Here's what I love about the Beast in the book, which is that like it feels different because it's this beautiful like innocent animal that he just shot. And the feel of that moment, the awkwardness of that moment of like having to do violence to this innocent thing in order to get what you want, like really encapsulates a lot of what the book has to say about you know, desires and fantasies and how they you know, the damage that they cause in order to get them, which isn't present here. And the other thing that bothers me about her slightly is just that like maybe it's not even her, but just it seems at this point that like every Fillory character has like the same personality, which is like fuck you. Like they're very like abrasive and obnoxious people as a whole, which I'm getting a little bit tired of. I want more variation.
Though I will say she's a slightly different version of that though, because she kind of has that, but she also kind of has like a more like she has that attitude, but part of it's coming in this case because she got shot, and I think you then see they show just enough of how like if let's say he hadn't shot her, like her attitude's maybe not quite that.
Yeah, I'm just, you know, I want the show to find more ways to deconstruct and undercut their fantasy tropes than just that.
I think it was appropriate with her, but I do think yes, going forward they need to probably find different people because it is the same thing. But you know, I agree. I think it made more sense in the book for it to be an innocent creature because it fit better with the desperation Quentin had.
Yeah.
In terms of, I think this one fit better in terms of there is a desperation, but like his state of mind is, I think, fits better with this being what represented here.
Now, let me ask you. We haven't talked about this since our podcast episode on season 1, but there's a very key part in the books that's skipped here, which is the part where during his convalescence, like Quentin like attains a whole new level of like magical skill. I know you've had some opinions about that in the books. How do you feel about that being gone here?
I understand why it's gone here because like they've kind of just established that Quentin, that all of them in general are more competent with magic in the show than they are in the books.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, you know, it's annoying. As always, the de-dernification of the magic is obnoxious. That one was, I mean, that one also worked better because I understand why they can't do it here though. Is that one made sense there because Quentin was there for like a year and a half or something.
Yeah, that's true.
In the book, and time passes differently in Fillory, so it didn't affect. Whereas like they're all here, and so it's a little weird. I know why they couldn't do it. I think also it wouldn't have made any sense here because Quentin did train to become a better magician, but his like, I guess the difference is when Quentin leaves in the book, it's more like he's like, I'm just done. I'm not like disgusted with all of magic. He's like, I am, but like he's not like literally just like magic as a whole can go burn in a fucking fiery pit of hell. He's just like, I'm just tired. And
well, I think in the book it's like it goes back to the idea of like having everything you want, in that like he's throughout the book he's struggled with always trying to reach the next level with magic, and now that he's been kind of hollowed out by the pain of losing Alice, he sort of has this ability to progress to the point where he can literally do basically like anything he wants. Like all his magical limitations are removed. He completes Alice's project to show that he's surpassed her, and then he rejects falling through with that because like there's nowhere else for him to go, and having answered all these questions and achieved the end of this path still hasn't done anything for him. And even if it like forces Grossman to come up with like new ways to find limitations for him going forward, I still think that's like an interesting thing.
Oh, it is. And I wouldn't mind them figuring out a version of that still. Like I would like them to have that training montage at some point still.
Yeah.
It'd be great. I just understand why they didn't here though, because he's just so he like the magic itself is just like,
yeah.
He's like, he thinks it's poison. Like he thinks everything, like they made it much more like he thinks everything's poisoned and like it's all disappointing type stuff. I mean, he has a little bit of things like, where I was interested for seconds, like, oh, is Quentin going to stay here long enough to learn how to shoot a bow and arrow? And they're like, no, Penny's going to tell him magic school. I was like, oh, that makes more sense.
That was still kind of ridiculous. Like Quentin is so much lamer here than he is in the books.
Yeah. Which is, I think one of the things Grossman struggled with at times was Quentin kept being more competent than I think Grossman wanted him to be.
Yeah.
And I think that's why Grossman's fine with it here, which is why I said it took until book 3 for them to finally figure out how to properly categorize Quentin.
Yeah.
Where we're supposed to be more like Quentin is a very impressive person. He's just not impressive compared to other impressive people.
Yeah.
And like he happens to be around other impressive people. So it's like, he was around Alice, who is clearly better at this than him. He's around Julia, who, if nothing else, was more driven than him. And had, more driven than him. And then ultimately he's around another character who may exist in this show who is also more naturally talented than him. And like, it's more like, not so much that he wasn't great, but, he was 1 in 1,000. They were all like 1 in 100.
Yeah.
He was 1 in 100. They were all 1 in 1,000. I apologize.
The book's exploration of like different kinds of talent and skill is really just gone here. Right.
But instead, to be fair though, that was an exploration that took Grossman a long time to figure out, because early what he wanted is clearly what Quentin is in the show, where he's like a much more pathetic version. And he just kept making him inadvertently, especially because of how like precise and like nerdy magic required. There was a limit to how like much you could make someone suck who like got through that point.
Yeah.
Which is, I mean, to be fair, they kind of acknowledge here of just like the getting through break bills gets you enough to where you just can do whatever you want. So like, even if it's the equivalent of like, the whole joke about, what do you call the lowest, the lowest scoring person of a graduating class of med school. And it's like a doctor.
Yeah.
They passed, like they're still a doctor. So it's like, even if
he
was the worst.
It does sort of feel like everyone in the show is a doctor, even like Julia, and nobody is like a neurosurgeon. Like even Al, I mean, there was some stuff last season about Alice being like better than all of them, but they haven't really touched on that this season. Where like she was chosen to do the big spell more because she had like the god juice to handle it.
But she was given the god juice because of that. And also they do have the scene where it's like, well, now that you have the power, do whatever you want, and she can do like kind of the crazy stuff. So I mean, they do it a little bit, but yes, it's not quite the same. You know, and also like they're all just more naturally gifted at it. So I mean, I do think they show a little bit just with the scene of how like both Alice and Penny wanted to work and learn the battle magic on their own, where they, you know, it's the one part of like the terribleness of the emotion juice. But the one part they do show is that Alice and Penny seem to have a better knack for getting things than the others do.
Yeah.
Or just the patience to do it, which is a key part of it. And that's why it makes sense to me that Penny be the one to tell him a spell. Because, like, you know, it makes sense that Penny is like, you know, Penny has a little more natural aptitude, which makes sense because he clearly studies less than the rest of them because he fucking hates this shit. Penny continues to be like the main character of a YA novel that's like, why am I here? Why? I don't want to be here. I just want to be like away, and you keep giving me magic powers. I don't want them, and I'm stuck with them, and I hate you all. But I guess since we're talking about Penny, this is good because one, I actually think they were kind of they did some clever stuff with. I guess we'll first just do the Quentin and Penny stuff. Like they did some clever stuff with them here, where they first had the scene where he shows up, and they of course just argue. And I remember just being like, "God damn it!" Like having your moment of like, I think maybe sometimes like they should just not be dicks to each other. And then I was like, clearly they were using that against me because they finally do have the moment where they kind of actually break through a little bit. And had like an actual discussion, and it actually worked a lot better because it was such after me just not expecting it because I was like, oh, they're not going to do it, and then you know they actually do it, and it makes sense that like especially with like Penny acknowledging kind of like it was a combination too of like Penny's acknowledging the mind reading, and at first, but then later like him using that to be like, look, I saw the words, and there's actual genuine like sorrow in his voice of. Not just that he sees in the wars, but he actually like he feels bad that he actually saw that.
I mean, I liked what they did with Penny in this episode as far as it went, other than the hands thing. But I feel like I'm still like searching for that, you know, character to have something going on for himself and not in relationship to other people. You know, some kind of arc for him to be going through. I think it's just been like we've talked about, they've just been like treading water for like almost half the season now.
Well, yeah, I mean the hands thing clearly was supposed to be it. So I'm hoping maybe next episode, because they're going to have the space, maybe they can actually, because the hands are going, if they are going to have the hands still be glitchy, they're going to actually explain why this is happening.
Yeah,
and not just be because you know the river dude's like you're a dick for reasons.
Yeah, the river dude just happens to be like an incredible badass at curses, famed throughout the land.
Yeah,
fear to the hearts of centaur doctors everywhere.
But I mean, like, yeah, I do think it. Well, speaking of which, where are you at? Yay or nay towards bringing in character actors to show the I'm shitting face?
I mean that was funny. I think that like we can talk briefly about the centaurs and that like besides my annoyance at them just not having enough screen time, I think that they missed the opportunity to do like one of the funniest deconstructions that Grossman ever does, which is just that the centaurs are like polite but like definitely racist against humans, which I think is hilarious and way better than just like centaurs. It's a man horse that acts like a horse and sometimes a man, like, you know.
Yeah, I did. Yeah, I forgot about that, but they are definitely like they're helping Quentin, but like they're very racist towards him the entire time.
Yeah.
And that was an interesting note for them to do. I think it would have worked. I mean, I think it would have been even more interesting here if it had just been subtle because like they would be like, because Quentin's actually king here. So it would be like, you know, there's a limit to how much they could actually do, but you could see like little subtle things they add on. I think that could have been really nice and worked really well.
Yeah.
But you know, I mean,
the poop joke was good too, I guess. Sure.
It was. I thought it was a pretty funny joke just because it was so random, and because Penny, and because it was with Penny, who was just like, "What is happening?" And then, of course, it led to him being freaking out, and then the greatness of them getting drunk, and then Penny's like, "That's it, cut off my hands." And then Quinn's like, "I can't do it," and he's being all nice, and Penny's like, "You know what? Fuck you, man. You're weak." And then he just cuts off his hands, and he's like, "Oh God."
That scene was really funny and really well done, and I thought the actors like really sold the hell out of that. Like, I loved like Quentin, I forget exactly what he does, but he's like about to cut it off at first, and then he sort of like waves the axe around like he's trying to psych himself up for it. It's just like that's really well done.
Yeah, like I enjoy. It felt very realistic of like him trying to do it and him trying to psych himself up. And I like the fact that like when he finally got pushed to do it, though, it just happened. And like Penny was like, "Oh my god!" And it also
Yeah, but he's like, "Oh my god, I do feel it. I do feel it."
Right, and also it was very clear that it was going to take more than one strike to cut off his hand. So it was like clear he just like cut off a part of it and it was still there. And Penny's like, "Oh god!"
Yeah, there's a great classic like cringe cut to a different character like cutting up herbs and stuff with that little rotating knife thing.
Yeah, and then like yeah, and then also like like when you cut to the next day and Penny just has like no hands.
Yeah,
he's just like, and you're just like laughing because the look on his face is just like it's not as good as the look he has initially in the first episode where he's just carrying around his hands in like a box.
Yeah,
and he just has a look on his face of like, what is happening? I have no hands. God damn it. But I think it does work really well, and it was a great scene. It also led to, the rest of their comedy act for the episode of when they get into the high forest and the flying forest.
I thought it was, it was okay. It wasn't like super great. It wasn't like terrible.
Well, it starts out strong, if only because I enjoyed them acknowledging like, holy shit. Because obviously some of this is a hand wave of like, because they actually are walking trees in the books.
Yeah.
So I do feel part of them was being like, we don't have the budget for walking trees. But I did like the initial part where they're walking through and suddenly like, oh my god, these kids were like 10 when they walked through this forest.
Yeah, that was funny. That was funny.
Like, that's really fucking dark. Except, realizing it. And then after that, it gets pretty treads on normal territory. I do think they helped with the like ultimate breakthrough when Quentin, like Alice helps Quentin break through and then he like fucking loses it.
Mm-hmm.
And then, like it said, it leads to the nice moment where Penny, experiences it. And also he like encourages them. He's like, look, I need your help. You have to get your shit together. We can't do this. Like everyone needs you now. Like,
yeah,
it was just a good moment. And like, it was all genuine too. Like, it wasn't like he was saying it. And I like how they didn't, and it was important. They didn't undercut that at all.
Yeah.
Even how he treats him going forward is like a little bit nicer.
No, I think that's important to the show as a whole, that like they need to do this more where they sort of relax and let the sincere moments play out.
Yeah, and they definitely did here, and I think that was good, and it helped make it work. And then obviously, then they catch they catch the beach, and so hopefully we'll kind of establish a softer touch between the two of them. Penny and him can still do it, but maybe like it's a little less. Maybe they're a little more subtle and not just him being like, not just Penny being like, nerd, and like punching him in the arm.
Yeah, I mean, I don't know. This dynamic I feel like would always have worked better if like Quentin had come to the point where he could like fire back as well as he got, and he never really hit that point.
Yeah, I mean, I think they don't. That's another example, I think, of like them not wanting to let Quentin be. Like, I think they did go too far in the direction of making Quentin be pathetic.
Yeah.
Because they didn't want him to fire back. Similar to how, like, when they were actually, they had that, we got really, and I was especially annoyed when they had that scene between Quentin and Julia where they confront each other in season 1 about her having magic and him like abandoning her and all this stuff. And, they basically took away all the stuff in the book that made that one scene work and like just made it all Quentin being a dick.
Yeah.
And to be fair, I give them some credit. They then used that interesting thing to make like her putting him in like a coma, which leads to him seeing Taylor Swift in his mind, which is amazing. But like that scene was an example of them being like, we don't want to give Quentin anything, because in the book that was definitely a scene where like Quentin's kind of in the right because she's like a crazy person who walks with him like drugged out almost, and he's like, and he hadn't seen her in like he hadn't seen her in a while, and he was very concerned about her, like about everything involved with her. And it was just a very different dynamic, and it made sense why he was turned down. Whereas this one, they made it a big thing where he turned it down because, she didn't date him.
Well, should we talk then about the Julia Margot scene of this episode where Julia is like 100% to the wrong?
She is she is not 100% in the wrong. She's like 85% in the wrong.
She's okay. Let me, the two things that stuck out to me is that first of all, she's like, if you had trusted me, they'd both be dead right now. And I'm like, you never asked them to trust you. You never told them what the plan was. You just jumped in and ran away.
Yeah, that scene. I really like that scene. I really liked that scene existed, but yes, that did bring back my then anger at the fact that she is correct, but then the show refused to actually like have them have that discussion, which is why like it made no sense because
Yeah.
like I'm like, yes, that was kind of my whole point about why I was angry as your discussion with Quentin went the way it did. Because you had those discussions, you could have been like, I was going to kill both of them, and I protected you, and so that annoyed me. No,
And the other thing that bothered me about that scene was her characterization of Margot. Like Margot seems to take that to heart and be like really wounded by that. And kind of she goes back to Elliot and reconsiders her earlier actions. But I don't actually feel like that characterization of Margot is accurate to the show, and I don't think Margot has like been that person maybe ever, but definitely not since like halfway through the first season.
I would argue. Well, here's the thing. So that version of it was too much of a generalization.
Yeah.
But it is absolutely true that based on this show, that Alice, Margot, and Elliot were not friends.
Yes, but they're like, yeah. My objection was more like the way Julia puts it is like, you're more concerned about your looks than people around you, and it's like that's not really what's going on with Margot at all.
Well, like appearance. Not,
Yeah.
looks isn't the right word. Like
whatever. Yes.
I mean, it's like somewhat true, but yes, it is a little undercut by the fact that like her and Elliot clearly have a real relationship.
Yeah.
So it was like a little bit of an overstatement, but like there's a kernel of it. There's a reason why I'm like, look, Julie was somewhat right.
I mean, I liked the show pointing out that scene with Elliot and Margot where Elliot is like, where Margot is like, was it Margot or Elliot that was like they were a package deal and we're really friends with Quentin and Alice just kind of came along.
That was Margot. Basically, that's when they're first doing the like they're having a discussion about the lands and Elliot's like freaking the fuck out because Alice is dead.
Yeah.
And Margot's trying to compartmentalize and be like a ruler. And Elliot's like, we're going to build a statue. And he's like, she was our friend. And then that's when she says it. And it's absolutely true that in the book, even in the book, that's actually somewhat true, but it's less so because they hang out enough where they are actually all friends. But even in the book, they are technically closer to Quentin than Alice. But in the show, it is absolutely true that they are friends with Quentin and Alice is there because Quentin is there. Because like they hung out with Quentin from the beginning. They latch on. Like that is absolutely true. And so like I did like how they acknowledge it. And it also fit really well because it fit with, it was a continuity thing that fit because like part of Elliot's plea to Alice was kind of him acknowledging like, I will be better to you because I wish I had been from the start as a like, we're going to be better friends. And then like, Margot never had that moment too, because she doesn't really consider her a friend and it like fit.
Yeah.
There's your pizza.
There's my pizza. Hang on a sec. Okay, I am back.
But yeah, I think it was important that it was, sorry. I think it was like a really nice continuity thing that I wasn't sure they were going to do, where it kind of seemed like after last season, when everyone was kind of separated, they were just going to kind of pretend they were all as close as they were supposed to be. And I kind of like that they acknowledged, like, look, they're not. Like, this makes sense.
There's, I mean, the thing in the book is that, like, they're all physical kids, and that club is like only them.
Yeah, there's 5 of them.
Right, and so like
and Penny kind of weaves in and out, but he's not a physical kid, so
yeah. So like that it forces them to kind of be knit close together. However much they may like or have issues with each other, they're still like hanging out all the time. And in the show, like, their physical clubhouse is like full of random people, and they're just like kind of normal friends, and they're really only thrown together with Alice, like, to hunt the beast, basically.
Because yeah, they do a really good job of making it where, like, because Alice is pretty isolated from them until Quentin brings her in, and they start doing stuff. And then Quentin asks basically for other people to help, and then Penny basically is only, it's a similar thing of like, they're not friends with, they're not friends with Penny. Penny was friends with Alice, and like begrudgingly, he's kind of friends with Quentin, but doesn't like acknowledging it.
Yeah,
I mean, he's more so close to Quentin than he would be to Elliot and Margot.
Yeah.
And so, like, yeah, I thought it was a nice moment. And I think that's why I think that scene kind of worked. I think someone like Julia somewhat calling that out was useful. If they had a little more screen time together before that point, it would have worked better.
Yeah, like when did Julia and Margot ever hang out and to like hate each other?
Like 2 times. I mean, keep in mind, part of it is also that one of her first interactions with her physically was when Quentin got put in that coma.
Mm-hmm.
And so, like, Margot is kind of very loyal to her friends, like her actual ones, which are basically Quentin and Elliot.
Yeah.
And so I think part of it is that, like, she still doesn't necessarily, when you're first meeting her is after you find out she put Quentin in a curse that almost killed him. That at least turns her off. In Margot's case, I think she just kind of used in Julia's case, she used Margot as like a proxy for like the entirety of the whole, like, that like conflict she has in general with the break bills people think they're better, that they didn't really do enough with in the first season.
Yeah.
So it's one of those ones where that scene itself, the actual logistics of it aren't entirely great. I'm glad it happened because it is the kind of interactions that need to happen in the show. I thought it worked well enough to kind of just have a point where, like, also Margot softened a little bit and helped her out a little, which is totally reasonable. Like, if Margot had just been like, nope, don't care, like, that's completely unreasonable. Like, you can't.
I liked Margot's little mini arc in this episode. I thought that was well handled.
Right. And then, like, yeah, in general, I think she worked pretty well in how she was trying to help Elliot. I guess, do we want to switch from to him, or do we want to do the Julia part of it, since we're kind of talking about both of them peripherally?
Let's do the Julia part of it, because that's, I think, a little lighter than the Elliot stuff, which I think gets to some of the heart of the show.
Right. So Julia's stuff, I mean, the big part of Julia's stuff is Katie comes back, and that was vitally helpful to her character because it was nice to see someone be around her that wasn't like yelling at her.
How do you feel about that choice, though, from a moral perspective? Like, she initially, like, she saves Katie from Reynard, and she wants to protect her, which is why she doesn't initially go to her to try and catch Reynard. And now she's like, well, I have no other options, so now I'm going to drag you back into this. I mean, do you feel like that's something she shouldn't have done for Katie's sake?
I think it's one of those ones where, in her mind, she didn't want it to happen, but like Reynard's just murdering all these people at this point. And I think Julia had to make some moral calculus of just like, I need someone I can trust. This is the only person I have left. She kind of owes me. I think that's what they put. I think, to be fair, to help you skip some of those moral stuff, I think that's the entire reason she was addicted to cocaine, like addicted to heroin.
Yeah. Was
to give a reason for why, like, Julia is saving her from something. And then, like, it's not quite just she's doing it. Like, because considering how easily she seemed to get over her heroin addiction, because I guess magic's
She
just
said,
like
did she say that she was on like magical methadone, or was she saying that methadone is
no,
magic?
she's saying she's on both. I think she was saying she was both on magic and methadone. Like the
Okay.
joke was like, I'm on magical methadone and also methadone. But yeah, like, but I think that's why that was there. I mean, it made sense to me considering where she's at. Also, I could live with just in a moment of weakness. I can live with characters who make, even if I agree like morally it's not the best. I think it's a justifiable decision because she's at such a low point.
Yeah.
And like Katie and her were actually kind of friends to begin with, and so like it was just nice seeing like, because pretty much at this point, you know, Katie can have a discussion with her in which they act like normal. You know, Quentin and her kind of can, but like usually some random plot thing comes up to like make them argue for some reason.
Well, I mean, you're right from like a construction standpoint that like Julia has no other characters in her storyline anymore, so she definitely need to go grab somebody.
Well, but it's not even just that. It's just that like it's also important, I think, to have that character who exists who isn't going to be yelling at her
Yeah.
all the time. I think
No,
like
that's true.
You know, Katie's from a friendly perspective. She understands. I think it worked too because Katie like was like, you know, I really wanted to help you, but I just ran. You know, I was terrified, and I liked that Julia was just kind of like, it's fine. Like, basically, she kind of gave acknowledgement of like that dude be scary.
Yeah. I did appreciate the clarification here that like Reynard has not been killing people prior because he was like not on Earth for the like 40 years prior to them summoning him. So that made that make a lot more sense.
Now I guess it's also, I think it's also more that like now like the random groups can summon him just that, where it took that powerful group to summon him from like the
right,
like out of like the hell space he was in. But you know, I think there's a lot of decent stuff they did with her in this episode. I think it helps. They show a lot of stuff of her like actually handling things very strongly. Of like she's not exceptionally angry. Like, you know, even the Margot stuff, she gets. You know, that's why I get a little annoyed when she kind of started touching on the whole like you guys think you're better and stuff thing. But for the most part, she like took any yelling that happened to her in stride. She was like, I'm going to do this. She understood what she had done wrong in the past. Like there's a bunch of like really like just strong, like emotionally stable moments. Mm-hmm. Which is why, of course, you know, she doesn't get shade talk. Quentin get the talk of shade.
Who's going to get their shade ripped out by the end of the season?
I was kind of like, God damn it. Don't do shade things to Quentin. Ridiculous. But I do think this is a good episode for her in terms of, for the most part, it like helped. It helped like establish a version of her that's like, you know, the strong kind of version we've been wanting her to be. I think you see parts of here, but with a more emotional tinge than her in the book, since like she still has her humanity-ish.
Yeah, I thought the Julia stuff was mostly decent. I have two major complaints about it. One is that like, and this goes back to last season of Game of Thrones, so you know, anybody who doesn't want to be spoiled on that can skip a minute or two. But once again, if a character comes back from the afterlife and it's like, holy shit, that was horrible, and we don't have any like real acknowledgement of that yet. So I'm hoping that maybe next episode they'll get into that, because holy shit, that was that's some pretty important stuff.
Oh, you mean in terms of like
in terms of Marita coming back and being like, the place that I was in is horrifying, and please don't send me back there. And they're like, well, you're gonna go back anyway.
Oh, so you mean the like literal, like them discussing theologically what it means?
Yes.
Game of Thrones did it a little bit. It was very brief, and it really only comes back from, but it really comes in more of a different conversation, in different context.
Yeah.
But you're right. They don't have like they just kind of a little bit of a discussion about it, and then that's it. And they don't really want to examine the fact that like some of the stuff he reveals seems to contradict like all of the teachings of all the religions.
Yeah.
Except, you know, one of the religions may or may not have brought a character back to life. So it's like this complicated clusterfuck Game of Thrones where it's like, well, some of it may be true, some of it may not be, and no one knows exactly where it's from. So it's kind of that. So yeah, I mean, it'd be interesting.
I mean, we do know that book two like touches on that in an important way.
Yes.
So I'm excited to see like if this is like planting the seeds for that, then that's pretty cool.
Yeah, the book two's version of it is specifically like otherworld based, which is there. But I mean,
That's true.
I will say this: this season could definitely use an episode where like I don't know, Quentin or a couple characters are all in a room and Julia's there and they're all getting like high, and they just start talking about the afterlife or something, like in
Yeah.
a funny way. They don't need to do it in a serious way.
The show in general needs more scenes where they're not talking about the plot.
Well, yeah, and just like dicking. I think that's the type
Yeah.
of humor I think they could be really good at and they waste. But yeah, so that's the Julius scenes I think mostly did well, but you're right, there are some issues. I'm still glad Katie's back. Like I really like that character in general. I think she has a lot of potential if they just let her be in the show and not be a side character or entirely a side character.
I swear I had another issue with that. Like I said, there was two, and it was the first one.
Yeah, I wondered about that, but I was just assuming you had miscounted because the difference between one and two men. It's just
No, so sorry. Remind me what happens. So she's. I know she goes to break dolls.
The basic thing is she goes and finds Katie. She gets her off the drugs. Then they have to do a spell, so Katie goes and buys.
Okay. I remember what it was.
Buys a necklace.
I remember what it was. The other major issue I had with that was just that, like, and this goes back to what we talked about a couple episodes ago in terms of like the way that the show uses magic as a metaphor. In that I feel like we're kind of fractured again because this one was a very clear instance of like, magic is sex, magic is transactional when they make that joke about like turning tricks. That like doesn't really match up with what's going on in Fillory, and it just like I really dislike the way the show like twist this to different ways and different storylines. It's just like there's a way to make that a lot more unified and impactful.
Yeah, they don't focus enough, which is sad, but I was willing to let it go because it was some fun character moments. But yeah, I mean, I've kind of accepted the unified magic theory of the magicians is never going to happen. So, I mean, it's one of those ones we're getting like dwelling on. It's just going to drive you crazy. And
well, I mean, what is this podcast series if not just dwelling on shit they're never going to fix?
Yeah, but I find that a lot less useful this season than it was last season. Also, in general, it seems like they've also kind of taken a decision to maybe like de-emphasize them using certain magic, which, considering they weren't using it correctly to begin with, I think was a good call.
Yeah.
It means I'm not being drawn attention to the fact that they're not casting spells all the time or practicing them. Instead, they're just like, there's magic, and they just kind of go on from there. But yeah, I guess then that brings us to, well, I guess we'll talk about that within it. Fogg will talk about within the Elliot storylines. Then we have Elliot. So there's two parts to Elliot's storyline. Well, I guess three.
Mm-hmm.
And, the first is that Elliot's freaking out. He's having an existential crisis he's basically having his like quarter life crisis as some version of that crisis because, he was, he didn't even figure out who he was properly. And now he has to be a king. He can't leave. He's stuck in a relationship that like he's not necessarily opposed to, but it's not something I think they do a good point of pointing out that like he wouldn't have necessarily chosen that first. Yeah,
let me talk about the king part because I really like the way that the show did this, and I don't get to say that sentence often enough. So, the fact that I love the moment in Fogg's office where the dean is like, he's like, Elliot's like, I don't know what to do. On the one hand, I have to stay in Fillory. On the other hand, that kind of blows. And the dean is like, well, then your choice is clear because one of those things you have to do. And I felt that like really was a strong way to express the idea of like, you can't escape being an adult with adult responsibilities, and you just have to deal with that. And I think that's definitely the situation that Elliot is in now, where he's like, this is the path that's been laid out for me. This is what I have to do. These are the people that I'm responsible for. And as much as that bothers me, and as much as I might wish that's not the case, he really just has to kind of suck it up and figure out a way to do it.
Yeah, and I like the fact that I like the way Fogg was like, my students went and conquered another world, and then Elliot has a great line like, well, they kind of gave it to us, and he's like, yeah, but still, and yeah, it had a nice solution of it made sense that academically speaking, crap, hold on. Sorry, I thought I'd knocked my contact out, and I wasn't going to be able to do that for like the next 15 minutes. But I like the way that, like, you know, he's like, I don't know what to do here, and then Fogg's like, that's fine. We're going to spend the rest of this independent study of the year teaching you how to be a good king. And like that was a good example of them finally doing a like, we're fucking magicians. We can do whatever we want. That means I can literally get a hold for you like every text necessary to be a leader, every person who knows how to be a leader. And I'm like, yes, this is an example of things you can do when you're magicians, whatever the hell you want.
Yeah, that goes back to one of my favorite things about the book's world building, which is that, like, you know, the magicians that are out there who are adults are like all like incredible experts in whatever they do because they don't have to do anything else. And so I liked, and I also liked just the acknowledgement that like they are still students, they're still technically in school, and so I liked them calling that back.
Yeah, and you know, I think, and so yeah, that scene worked really well. It gave a good beat for Fogg to help, I think, establish how he's going to keep being in the show.
Yeah,
and like, you know, it was a good setup for Elliot, you know, to go along with this and kind of help him deal with his like being an adult thing, which, you know, also worked really well because, you know, you just had that part where at the time all he seemed to care, especially after he spent most of the episode caring about like getting revenge on
Todd.
Yeah,
fucking Todd, man.
Which at the part where he's like, are you wearing one of my, like, wearing his vest? And just like, yeah. And he's like, I'm going to murder you. Was pretty great.
Yeah. Well, there's yeah, I mean, you know, Todd is kind of stepping into the role that he previously had, and he's, you know, feeling like, but I was supposed to be that person. I'm the life of the party, goddammit. I'm the one who makes the best drinks. Before we leave Dean Fogg's office, I wanted to just point out that, like, they fucking did exactly what I didn't want them to do, which is that now they're, like, spending the rest of the season being like, God, if only Ember hadn't shit in the well. It's all this goddamn magical poop that's causing all these problems. I'm like, God damn it, the magicians.
Well, I actually argue they did both. The wellspring was already damaged, and the point was supposed to be that, like, Ember then doing this further also caused damage. Admittedly, I would help if they at least had Ember speak as to why he did it, like what it meant, like acknowledge why, like him doing it, even if it was just Ember being like, it was the only way to stop the beast. You'll have to figure it out. Good luck, humans. But I mean, yeah, I think they threaded it just enough. But part of it only works, though, if they're also going to maybe do some of the stuff where, considering you find out kind of later, Ember, as I've said, kind of is not, he's already kind of a dick, but you find out even more so comparatively. There's problems with him. Like,
yeah, I mean, I don't know. It really annoyed me, especially because Dean Fogg like deliberately pointed that out. Like they lampshade it heavily, or they're like, you know, it just goes to show that like comedy and tragedy can intermingle, and I'm like, that's really it. Yes, but that's not like the right. I don't think that's the right tone for this plot line.
Yeah, I mean, we'll see how they do it. I'm willing to they softened it enough to where it doesn't seem like it's entirely basic. That could work. We'll see. It was one of those ones where I just accepted there was a weak plot line that made up that in another episode of a bunch of strong plot lines. If this is a thread I have to deal with, it's like fine.
Yeah.
You know, the wellspring was already damaged. You know, Ember's a dick. These things happen. Yeah, so, and then of course they had the part where like the council's trying to clean up the well, and they're like doing a bunch of bunch of poop jokes basically.
Yeah.
Not meaning to, of like, we have to get it out. It's like, you know, we can't, and like all this stuff, and you're just like, but you know, I think for the most part that scene worked well and set up a nice framework. And then, you know, it'll be interesting to see now. I do like they use the golem callback to give away for, you know, Elliot not to just be stuck in Fillory, since they probably quickly realized that like they can't do that because the other characters in Fillory just can't be the only thing he talks to.
Yeah, it was really interesting. I like that a lot. It was it achieved no pun intended climax in that scene where he's having the interdimensional threesome between what's his face in the Earth, and then his wife back on Fillory. but like the whole thing was like a really good metaphor for the way that like Elliot's heart is in two places right now.
Yeah, I think it worked really well. I think it furthered, you know, it was a good metaphor to use, and it also helped kind of, as we joked about, highlighted the weirdness of what they're trying to do with his sexuality, which we can't quite figure out yet.
Yeah.
You know, I mean, I think definitely, and I said this before, it's definitely still clear that, like, you know, if he had to choose, he would choose men.
Yeah.
That's obvious. But, you know, he's definitely done enough. I kind of like I do find it funny that effectively he turned his wife into like a nymphomaniac almost. It's kind of funny. It actually kind of works. Especially just because like his response to her being like that is like, it isn't just like, oh God, it's like, you know, he makes jokes about it, but like he's just kind of like, oh, okay, sure. And not just like, oh God, this is the worst, you know, and like, you know, he has like the joke about it, but it's like a natural joke, and not like this like freaking out, like, oh God, I have to do this all the time. And
yeah, he's. I mean, one of the things that makes Elliot a good person is that he doesn't like turn any of his frustrations on her.
yeah, and I like that. And he also, like I said, he genuinely does seem to kind of like her in a way. You know, and I like her acknowledgement. I kind of like the way she did it too, of her. Like, I think this is a nice character moment for her too, where she was just like, I understand I wouldn't be your first choice, and like we're kind of stuck together, and so she kind of acknowledged it's weird too. It gives a self-awareness to her that I think helps that character work well. Though I did say I spent most of that time just being like, I mean, like if the Golem version of him, like how does the like constructs of the Golem's anatomy work? Like what happens there? Do you not notice? I'm not entirely sure.
I don't know. Let's not delve too deep there.
Yeah, I will say that was me. I was like, how does this work? And I'm like, David, don't go any deeper. And I was like, I already went too far, man. It's there.
Yeah, you already went a lot farther than I did.
No, I'll admit. But I do think the scenes were pretty effective once he kind of figured out how to do both, where he was literally like controlling both sides with the same actions.
Yeah.
As opposed to before when he was just like, I don't know what's going on. You know, and I do wish they would maybe be a little more. I'm hoping that maybe the idea is supposed to be he's not sure about his identity. In general, he's not, but I mean, and that kind of ties into him not actually being entirely sure of his own sexual identity. And then they'll make an actual statement about this, if only because then it will be a little more clear if they're. It's hard to tell how intentional. It's hard to sometimes to tell pure intentions for some of this stuff because they don't entirely want to commit to things.
Yeah, I don't think that he's confused. I think we're confused, and I want clarification from the showrunners in the show then as opposed to like I don't want Elliot to be like, I now realize that I've always kind of liked girls too. Like I you know.
No. I meant some of his confusion in terms of like I think that his identity crisis is pushing over into some of this too. He's not sure. I think he maybe wasn't. I think any of his confusion would just come from I'm not sure if he was entirely sure even in his mind exactly where he went purely along this, like where he went purely along like what he was okay with what he's not okay with. And that's not entirely like a thing, you know, oh, I realize like girls along, but like it does acknowledge more like he could help establish a frame of mind of like, well, I was more of just interested in this. And then, I realized I never really, I don't know. There's a way you can do it still without the pure, just, aha moment. And I think it's also important just because like, I like the idea of like exploring the spectrum based stuff, but even that you kind of have to acknowledge just because like, there's just, that stuff doesn't exist enough on television for you to get away with not actually expressing what's happening.
Yeah. I mean, I don't know. Like a lot of things in the show, it would be solved with like a good conversation between the people that this matters to. If Elliot like sat down his wife and actually talked about it.
Yeah. Or I could even live with a drunken conversation between Elliot and Quentin.
Yeah.
That feels like an appropriate place for it to happen as well. Or Margot, but I actually think the Quentin one actually might be a really good version of that to happen in.
Yeah.
But, yeah, I mean, like a good conversation is definitely needed. But I mean, I will say I continue to enjoy, the other reason I guess I just need to be explained is because like they haven't quite done enough to make it clear that I'm fairly certain they're trying to express he's on like a spectrum and like, you know, he's more supposed to be bi and it's not literally like they married off the gay guy and forced him to be with a woman. But since they haven't actually, like you said, had that conversation, that's always kind of still there.
Yeah.
The worry that that's actually what's happening and they're not expressing it. Or they're trying to act like it's like the same thing, which I don't think they're doing, but like that's the danger you get when you don't properly have like this expression. It's like that idea can kind of still be there, and based on this kind of how these showrunners work in the show, I can't imagine they want that to be the what's happening here, but like they haven't actually given any textual evidence to purely refute that.
Yeah.
You know, there's enough there where like I have enough where I can like, well, more than likely that's not true, but I can't just defend it. Like, nope, totally not true because of this, and he said this. Instead, I'm like, well, it's probably not true because we said before where I'm like, well, he did this and this and this, but that's not all necessarily like pure proof. In general, though, I'm glad, you know, we were worried that they were going to like skip over a lot of this Elliot stuff.
Yeah, no, I am glad that they kind of abandoned that idea, and you know, and we're gonna get to see him grow. It did. I mean, you know, I felt like they didn't quite thread the needle precisely with him freaking out at the beginning because I was like, dude, you already like, you know, you already solved their agriculture problems. Like you've done a little bit here.
Yeah, I mean, I thought the Alice dying part kind of pushed him. It was more like it made it even more real because like one of their group died. And like, you know, they're like Peter Pan fantasy, even at that level. He was having the issue with it, and this is another layer he wasn't quite ready to deal with. And so it made sense to me they freaked out a little bit, you know, and it wasn't entirely sure what to do. You know, I do also like they use that scene to establish kind of like some of the warlike mentality that Margot / Janet has in the books. Because, you know, she kind of as they go on, she kind of becomes like the warring. Like she is like the war person basically.
Yeah, she's kind of their general.
And you know, Elliot does his stuff when he needs to, but like she's definitely like the war chief.
Yeah, wasn't her thing here that like they were like, you know, they don't want to pay taxes, and she's like, fuck it, we're gonna make them pay taxes.
Yeah, basically, she's like, we're gonna make them pay taxes. We're out of money. You know, I do also like the fact that Elliot's like, I thought you said the statue was too powerful, and she's like, yeah, we have magic. That was stupid. We'll just make it ourselves. I'm like, yeah. Like I thought that was pretty obvious.
Yeah.
So what do I guess one thing they did establish, they did at least eliminate a couple of like different ways in which they're going to potentially bring Alice back. Do you think they're going to maybe explore more Niffin based stuff with this then, and maybe they'll like have like her corporeal body's gone and there's this one? Do you think that it's going to be? Do you think this more or less reinforces the idea of like hallucination, like dream type stuff more?
I honestly don't know because like to bring Alice back at any point soon would really undermine like the huge amount of like how hugely important it is to where Quentin is right now. Like that they did a good job of making her death very impactful for everybody, but for Quentin in particular. And you know, until he like gets through this period of his development, I feel like her showing up again, you know, in the next like even 3 episodes, would just be like a radically terrible idea for his character.
Yeah, the only reason I could think they could get away with it, like let's say the next episode, is if they wanted to use her to bring him back. But yeah, I agree.
But I thought about that. But like, yeah, that would be like a huge like reversal to me.
Yeah, I mean, I agree that I think that maybe like I think if I was doing it, you have the episode where this episode, next episode, maybe another one, depending on how they want to do it. Probably an episode in which they have like this little crisis in which she comes back, and then him kind of getting his groove back. And whenever she comes back, it needs to be to like throw a wrench into whatever new setup his life is, basically. You know, whether that be hell, whether that be the like initial flirtation of another person, whatever it is, like, you know, whether that be like him maybe getting close, you know, somewhat reacquainted with Julia, however they want to do it. But like her, if she's going to come back, it probably needs to either be status quo breaking or it's just like hallucinations.
Well, here's my question. Like at this point, knowing that they only have 10 episodes this season, right?
Yes.
So at this point, we're 4 in. Do we feel like they're going to adapt book 2 by the end of this season, or do we think that they're going to save that for next season?
I think they're going to get
it's all just going to be like aftermath stuff.
I think they're going to get to the processes of starting up book 2.
Okay.
But I don't know if they're going to do the full one. I do think this impetus of Alice doing this is going to be what leads to Quentin wanting to do this quest.
Yeah.
I actually kind of also wonder if they actually may decide to take Julia's story and give that to some of it to Alice.
Yeah.
I'm wondering if this is a big misdirect, which is like we keep expecting the stuff with the shade and all this bullshit.
Yeah, I mean, I mentioned that I think an episode or 2 ago that like Alice could take that role,
and which might actually work considering the place they're taking the Julia character, which means they could then do some really fun stuff with Julia that isn't, that especially considering in a lot of ways they do end up doing a little bit of it in the book that next book she's involved in. Mm-hmm. With like how her character kind of works, except they kind of have to rush it. So there's some interesting stuff they could do with that like maybe that would fit better. And then that lets Julia kind of have her own different storyline of how she goes through stuff. And also reinforces the fact that Julia is actually the main character of this show. But, it would be interesting if that's how they choose to do it. And if I was doing that, then you give them like 3 episodes and that gives like the last 3 for her to come back. Or even quite frankly, if I was doing it, I wouldn't even bring her back to like the finale.
I mean, I've said on record I wouldn't bring her back in the finale. I would bring her back next season.
I think it depends on what's happening in the finale.
I suppose. I mean, I would, I don't know.
The earliest I would bring her back is like the last scene of the penultimate episode.
I think
if you have something based around her coming back to fit with.
If you're right about how they're interacting with book 2 this season, and I think that's probably a good bet. How I would actually do it is I would have Quentin have either a vision of her or we would actually see her. He would find her briefly, and then that would be his like motivation to take the quest that covers the next season.
Yeah, I mean that definitely can work too, and then he finds it, or it could be he's going to her, and then when he finds, and they could end the season with him finding her, and then him finding her is the emphasis of doing the quest to like establish her being there and why she would go on the quest with them if they want her to be in the show more.
Yeah,
I mean, more than likely, I feel like if she is coming back this season, it's going to be, I think 3 episodes is about as much as we're going to get.
Yeah,
without her, which practically speaking, I understand.
Yeah.
Like she's a series regular. They aren't paying her. Like, she's getting paid for these episodes. Like she's getting paid a certain structure based off of even the episode she's not in. That's just what happens when you're a series regular. I don't believe she got I didn't check this, but more than likely, I don't know if she was in the credits or not. She probably was.
I don't know, but that's where all that sweet centaur money's going. So.
Yeah, there you go.
I hope she enjoys it.
That's why we could have had a centaur, but we have a, I mean, my response to people like, well, I don't know, guys. I mean, I'm cool that you made a bunch of people regulars, but I believe they made the actress who played Katie a regular, and she wasn't in the first 3 episodes. So
yeah,
Dean Fogg's been in a quarter of a scene, a quarter of so
yeah.
But in general, I think this is a good episode. I was pretty happy with it. Do more of this.
Yeah, seriously.
If this is your show from now on, I will legitimately be happy and not just ironically be happy.
Yeah, I mean they need to do more of having characters who have clear problems that are emotionally based and not just plot contrivances, and more direct addressing the major themes of the book and so on and so forth. So.
And they have a chance to, things can have a chance to breathe, and they can then rebuild back up to these big events.
Yeah, this there's a reason I only needed 4 haikus for this episode, because it was a little more focused and had some time to breathe, as you said.
Yeah, and there's and they can stall this Renard thing for a little bit, so they don't have to just immediately type thing. And this would also, I think, help Julie if, let's say, she's having to like try to find Renard but isn't doing it right away. So she's kind of getting the same treatment that the others got in the couple episodes when they were trying to fight the beast, where she kind of had to like live as well.
Yeah.
I think that might help. It could help if they're going to do something with, assuming, there is the one part of me that wonders, considering the beast made that big deal about he has like these great plans and he wants to do stuff, if he's actually entirely gone. Just because TV shows fall in love with actors like that all the time.
I don't know. I think he's pretty dead.
I hope he's dead, because as much as the TV side of me understands like why you would be inclined to have him come back, the part of me that's like, yeah, that completely invalidates what happens with Alice, is like, I swear to God.
I think he's dead, but I like that he continues to be an important part of the show. Like, I liked Quentin's reference to like, I wanted to be like Martin Chatwin.
Yeah, I think that was a good reference too, of explaining how he was just like, I wanted to be Martin, and then he kind of like, I met Martin, I don't want to be Martin.
Yeah.
Like, I think that like, seeing him kind of express like that problem too is really interesting.
Yeah.
And like fun and like insightful, and it's just a good showcase. It's a good showcase episode with like, normal television show flaws that like almost all episodes of television have, even the great ones, and not like, glaring, horrendous plot holes that make no sense. And, the only real rage-inducing moment I had was when they once again referenced they basically had to remind me of the conversation in Quentin and Julia that ruined half of the third episode.
Yeah, that was the only scene that like really annoyed me this time, man.
Right, and I still was less annoyed by it because I liked the existence of that scene, of who it was talking to, even if like it was somewhat ruined because it had to remind me of the stupidity of the planning of things. But that is all, I guess, we have to talk about in this episode. I'm just saying, thanks for watching or listening.
Yeah, thanks for listening and going to the joke.
Right. Ugh.
But don't you also say like that's it for this edition of the podcast?
Yeah, I was just going to. Okay. I think that's good for now. Sorry. That's it for this edition of the podcast. Thanks for listening. And we have to go now. The Kraken has made his own golem, and now they're going to thumb wrestle.
Thumb wrestle! Okay.
You're like, because I screamed that, the joke is safe.
No, I won't include that.
Yeah, I'm fine with it. I was tempted to just start singing the song.
Yeah.
1, 2, 3, 4. I declare. Oh God, he caused an earthquake in Japan. Okay, I'm stopping.
I already stopped. So.
Oh yeah, I forgot about this. This could be a problem.
What?
Oh, I just have to.
What did you do?
Oh, I didn't do anything. I just have to delete something in my Dropbox.
How are you out of space?
Oh yeah.
This is episode 4. And put your name on it.
Let's